We'll start with the prayers. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Panchadasi, Chapter 3, Panchakosha Viveka Prakaranam. In the Upanishads, they describe the creation in three realms. The first realm is the gross world. The second realm is the subtle world, and the third realm is the causal world. So these three worlds are one above the other. The causal world is the most subtlest, then comes the subtle world, and then the gross world. And also, the creation is described in three states: waking, dream, and sleep. These are three realms of experiences. In chapter 3, we talk about 5 koshas. Annamaya kosha belonging to the gross body, Manomaya kosha, Pranamaya kosha, and Vijnanamaya kosha belonging to subtle body, Anandamaya kosha belonging to the causal body. So whenever we try to analyze who am I, we must keep this very important point that there are 3 realms to this I. If you don't understand the 3 realms, then it is very difficult for you to follow the Upanishads revelation. The Upanishad goes beyond these 3 realms and says that that is your nature, that is what you are. That's why in Bhagavad Gita, you find that the whole teaching can take place in a battlefield. Why battlefield when thousands and hundreds of people are getting killed? There the message is very clear. Arjuna, you are not the body. What is being killed is the body. The killer is also thinking wrongly that he is the body. Because he's thinking wrongly, identified with his body, he has got sorrow. Arjuna has got sorrow and delusion because he has got identified with the gross body. And he thinks that the gross world which he's seeing in front of him is the real world, which is the same status for all of us. I know my gross body and I see the world in front of me, which I take it as the only reality. So when we come to Vedanta, many students, they find it very difficult initially, right from Tattvabodha stage itself. Because these 3 realms and what lies beyond the 3 realms is really, really very, very abstract. The mind cannot fathom the depth. And in the scriptures, it says you have to purify the mind, purify the mind, purify the mind. Then only this topic of the truth will be understood by you. See, this topic of Vedanta, the goal of Vedanta is to realize my real nature. And the 3 steps which is given is Shravanam, Mananam, Nididhyasana. And Shravana has to be done in 3 texts: Bhagavad Gita, Upanishads, and Brahma Sutra. So can you imagine that gigantic task which is generally given to understand the scriptures itself? Because Veda is something, it's very huge. It's a very, very huge. If you look at the Upanishads, you have 108 Upanishads where the mantras are given, the meanings are available. If you have to study those type of Upanishads and then try to understand the meaning and then apply it to yourself, it's going to take a long time. So the subject matter is not easy. Who am I? The question is very easy to ask, but the answer to that question takes time to analyze, to listen, to analyze in their own minds, remove the doubts, and then ultimately own up whatever is revealed as your true self. Now in this chapter, we have seen 26 verses. We are going to look at the 27th verse. Just to give you broadly what we have seen so far, basically there are 43 verses. The first 12 verses, 1 to 12, they talk about the 5 koshas. So if you want to know the 5 koshas, you have to go to the first 12 mantras. This chapter is divided broadly into 3 sections. The second section is 24 verses, mainly from 13 to 36. 13 to 36, it talks about Satyam, Jñānam, Anantam, Brahma, which is taken from Taittiriya Upanishad. That is the verse we are going to see in meditation today also. So this 24 verses is the heart of this chapter. It is trying to reveal the self through 3 words. And what are the 3 words? Satyam, Jñānam, Anantam. All discussions are based on these 3 verses, on these 3 words. And then the third section consists of 7 verses, which is analysis of what is Maya Shakti. So 12 verses plus 24 verses plus 7 verses makes it 43 verses, and that is what is the entire chapter. Now let us go to the verse where we stopped last week, and the 27th verse is continuing the topic of Jñānam. Today, most probably, we'll be taking this only 1 verse for our analysis because it's a very long verse. The meaning is very, very deep. Let's chant this verse first.
Akshanam vishayat svedrik, Akshanam vishayat svedrik, Parokshastagru uchchaye, Parokshastadrug uchchaye, Vishayenaksha vishayah, Vishayenaksha vishayah, Svatvanasya parokshata, Svatvanasya parokshata.
So here what Vidyaranya says is, what is the definition of aparoksha Ātma? How can I describe what is Ātma, which is a direct perception of myself? In order to do this, he says, you can have objects which are perceived, they are called as vishayas, and that you can say it is like this or like that. But the self, you cannot say it like this or that because it is not an object, it is the subject. Like this means what? Idrak. Like that means what? Tadrak in Sanskrit. Idrak means paroksha jnanam, pratyaksha jnanam. Pratyaksha means prati-aksha. Prati-aksha means in front of the sense organs. Suppose you are listening to music in your mobile, it is in front. It is in front, you are listening to a nice music. Or you are go to a concert hall and you are listening there. That means something is happening right in front and your ears are able to hear that. That is what is called as pratyaksham. Here, even though it means aksha, it includes all the 5 sense organs. So whatever is in front of the 5 sense organs, whether it is in the feeling of touch, whether it is smelling a fragrance, whether it is tasting something, or seeing through your eyes, or hearing through your ears. All this is called as pratyaksham. This concept should be very clearly understood because this is how the teaching takes place, and step by step, if you understand, you will be able to reach the goal of Ātman. What is paroksham? For me, America is paroksham. It is not in front of me. I live in Singapore, I see Singapore. You live in India, you see India. So for you, Singapore is paroksham, America is paroksham. For me, India is paroksham. Paroksham means it is beyond the sense organs. So object can be in front of the senses, objects can be beyond the senses. But there is a third variety. That is called as aparoksham. Aparoksham means it is not beyond the senses, it is not in front of your senses, but it is you yourself. So how do you describe that? It is never this or never that. Neti-neti. It is not this, it is not that. And all perceptions are centered on this I, which is the self. This I, which is the subject, all the perceptions are centered on that. So when I say aham, actually speaking, it is referring to the consciousness which is beyond the body and the mind. That is the real meaning of I. That is the real meaning of the self. But what is the meaning if I commonly use it in the transactions? That is what is called as the ego I. Now this is the crucial difference. We must know the difference between ego I and Sākṣī I. Sākṣī I is the pure consciousness. So pratyaksham, I have described to you, it is known directly through the senses and it is known through the mind. It is kama, krodha, these are all pratyaksham because these are all known to me by myself. It is nearer to me. It is known because of the reflection of consciousness in the mind. Suppose there is no reflection of the consciousness as in the sleep state, the mind is not active. Mind is passive. Reflection may be there, but that reflection belongs to the mind which says nothing is there because the mind is sleeping. So tadrak means other means of knowledge. Idrak means knowledge belonging to the sense organs. Tadrak means Paroksha Jñānam. Paroksha Jñānam means you can get it through Anumana, Upamana, Anupallavdi, Arthapatti, Shabda. There are totally 6 Pramanams. The first Pramanam is the Pratyaksham, which we know very clearly. What are the other 5? Anumanam means inferential cognition. Anumiti. I have done this before, but I'm just repeating to you. Suppose I see the smoke on the mountain, I can infer fire. So, but can the inference be used for the self? No, because nothing comes from the self. Inference cannot be used. Suppose there was a smoke coming from the self. I can say, yes, wherever I see smoke, wherever I smell something, that is where it is there. But I can't use inference for Ātman Jnana. Upamana. See, these 6 sources, you must be very clear. I'm explaining to you here in this, because this will be repeatedly used almost in every chapter of Panchadasi. What is Upamana? Upamana means through an example, I infer something. For example, example can be Ramu's brother or Ramu or Raju is like Ramu, but he is stouter and he is bald. So when you give these descriptions, you give some description of similarity between 2 people. Ramu and Raju are very similar because both of them are fat and both of them are bald. So suppose there are 5 people in a room and you say, go and look for Ramu and Raju. They are fat people and they are bald. Others are all lean people and they have hair in their head. Then you can use this Upamana and identify the person. Now, consciousness, the self, there is no Upamana for it. There is not another example to say that consciousness is like this. Because consciousness, the self, the subject is a very unique thing, attribute-less. What can you say about an attribute-less substance? There is no attribute. You cannot describe it as a property of belonging to Ātman. So Upamana cannot be used. Arthapatti. Arthapatti means you postulate. So I say Devadatta is fat, but he doesn't eat during the daytime. So what will you postulate? Yes, he is eating in the night time. So through postulation, assumption, you try to infer and you get the knowledge. That is what is called as another source of knowledge, arthapatti. Suppose you are sleeping and you are getting up in the morning and you see outside your house, it's all wet. You don't see the rain now, but you assume it must have rained in the night. So it is called as another source of knowledge, which is called as arthapatti. What is Anupallavdi? So Arthapatti is an indirect means of knowledge, but you cannot apply to Atma because you cannot assume anything. You cannot postulate anything because it is beyond the ken of the mind and the senses. If the senses were involved to know Atma, yes, you can postulate. If the mind is involved to know Atma, yes, you can postulate. But Atma is beyond these 2 instruments which we have. The fifth, in fact, the source is Anupallavdi. Anupallavdi means absential knowledge. When I say I went to the hall and I saw nobody there. So nobody is also a pratyaksha vishaya, and even though you can say Anupallavdi is like pratyaksha, what actually you're seeing is you're seeing the absence of people there. And because you are drawing inference from an absence, you give it a different category called as Anupallavdi. These are all the shastric way of getting Jñānam. This is all described in the Vedas. It's described in the Upanishads. These are all explained in the Brahma Sutras. The next one is the last one. It is called as Shabda. Shabda means words. The words which describe objects in the world cannot be used for knowing the subject, because all our physics books, chemistry books, biology books, botany books, all of them, they talk about things which are perceived by the sense organs. And then by reading a book, you can come to know about what the object is. But the subject is not available for the sciences or not available for the worldly books. The self is available only to the scriptures. So, Laukika Shabda is also not useful for subjective knowledge. So, what is the ultimate knowledge which we say? Not Pratyaksham, not Anumanam, not Arthapatti, not Anupallavdi, not Upamana, not Laukika Shabda Pramāṇa. The only thing is you have to come to śāstra. You have to come to the Veda to know who am I. So the śāstra says that Dehi is the real subject. What do you mean by Dehi? Dehi and Deha is used in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2. Dehi means the indweller, reflected consciousness and mind. That is together is called as the Dehi, the soul. But in that mind, there is a consciousness which is called as Upahita Chaitanya. That consciousness, which is reflected consciousness, is there along with the mind. It is enclosed in the mind. But there is another consciousness which is outside, which is not the same as reflected consciousness. It is called as original consciousness, which is the Adhara Chaitanya. So what is this Vishayi and Vishayan? Vishayan means objects. Vishaya yasya asti is Vishayi. That which knows the object is called as the seer, which is the consciousness. All the objects are called as Vishaya. Vishaya means objects. It can be inert objects or the beings who have got the reflected consciousness. But the seer is not the Vishaya. Seer is Vishayi, which is not Aksha Vishaya, but it is the subject. So what words can't be described is revealed as not this, neti-neti, right? All of you know that you cannot describe. Suppose I want to describe something. I keep on negating everything in the world. Through the neti-neti method, I can arrive at the self. That is the Vedantic Upanishad style of revealing the self. A desk is insentient, but I am sentient. That sentiency is called as consciousness. That sentiency is called as existence. So, Shruti, when it describes the pure Ātman, it is lakshayate. Lakshayate means it is indicating. Natu uchyate. Uchyate means what? It is not describing a thing as it is. It is only pointing. Lakshyate. Lakshanam means it is a indicator, a pointer for the ultimate reality. Because the reality cannot be explained. It is not a pratyaksha vishayam, it is not a vishaya of the mind. So how do you describe it? It is only through the indications. So Satyam Jñānam Anantam is an indicator. You must clearly know it is not a descriptive thing like he is bald or it is like this or it is fragrant or it is blue in color and so on. Every Shabda has got a artha. Artha means it tells about some object. But Shabda can't capture the self. Self is one's own real nature, which is not pratyaksha or paroksha, but whatever is not pratyaksha and paroksha. Now you understand the two terms, right? Pratyaksha means in front of the eyes. Paroksha means far away. So the self is what? It is not in front of the eyes. It is not in front of the sense organs or the mind. It is not very far away. It is neither this, it is neither that, but it is me, myself. That me, myself is called as direct realization of the self, which is called as aparoksha anubhuti. The self is only known through clues. What are the clues? For example, it is not an object of senses, so you can shut off all your senses. It is not an object of inference, similarity, postulation, absence, verbal testimony. So I can forget about all the other sources of knowledge. So ultimately, what am I left with? The shastric words. That is why faith in the scriptures is extremely important when we try to study the self. Knowledge of the self is not knowledge of the self, but it is the self which is already known. Because it is self-evident. It is ever-known fact. It is an eternal fact. So aparoksha anubhuti is not pratyaksha or anumana, but it is a known fact. The experience of I am is an ever-existing fact. But only thing is, I don't cognize it. I am not aware. I do not know how to realize that awareness. So through the study, what do? I recognize the consciousness. We don't pay attention to this consciousness, which is the subject, because we are attached to the 5 sense objects. Every time the mind is looking outside, either to some form and color, either to some sound, either to some taste, either to some nice scenery outside. I want to go and have a world tour because my eyes are longing to see Kashmir or Himalayas or Alps or some other place. Ultimately, they are only objects for the senses, nothing else. So my attention is always outside. I read the newspaper, I see the WhatsApp messages, everything is outside, outside, outside. The senses and the mind are always being directed outside. It is only when you come to a class of Vedanta, the Shastra tells us, stop all those external activities and now focus clearly on what the Upanishads are teaching. then you suddenly say, oh, there is another realm. I am is a continuous entity, sentient awareness. And that awareness is called as Satyam, Jñānam, Anantam. Nobody can say, I don't know the self, because everybody is the self. You cannot say, I don't know myself. You can say, I have not thought about what my real nature is. But you are, you cannot say, I don't know myself, because that self happens to be self-conscious. But how come I don't know? It is because your mind and the senses are not tuned. The Shastra tunes up the mind and the senses inwardly, and then you start seeing the reality. For example, a person is wearing a necklace and he says, I don't have a head. Like the other one, like the other example I told you, a person says, I'm talking, but I don't have a tongue. So Aparoksha Jnanam is a knowledge of the self which is always there. It is conscious. It is not idruk or tadruk, neither this or that. Now this is the clue which Vidyaranya is giving in this particular verse. To know the railway timetable, you can get a book. To know physics knowledge, you can get a book. But to know the self, you have to go to Brahma Sutra. So that is about Jnanam aspect, which we have seen. Just a quick revision is self is not absent, it is not shunyam, it is not blankness, it is available after you have transcended the five koshas, gone beyond the five koshas, gone beyond the three sharirams. It is not this or that. In some of the Zen schools, they give a stunning example for the intellect. Like what? They say meditate on sound of a clap with one hand. So your mind keeps on thinking, how can I hear the sound of a clap with one hand? Because one hand cannot clap. So that way, the Zen school tries to go beyond the intellect, beyond the mind. So similarly is what Upanishad is trying to do. Stunning the mind and saying it is beyond the senses, beyond the mind. Idruk, tadruk, we have seen. Self is not different from me. I cannot know the self like I know the objects of the world, like this or that. Now we come to the conclusion of the first topic of Satyam, Jnanam, Anantam. We have taken up Jnanam for study. In the 28th verse, Vidyaranya sums up the topic of Jnanam. Let us read the verse. Let us chant.
Avedya api aparokshah atah. Avedya api aparokshah atah. Svaprakasho bhavatyayam. Svaprakasho bhavatyayam. Satyam jnanamanantam cheti. Satyam jnanamanantam cheti. Astiha brahma lakshanam. Astiha brahma lakshanam.
So here Vidyaranya says, if it is not an object of knowledge, the self, it is not an object in front of me. The only way I will be able to know the self is because it is self-revealing. It is self-evident. So these three words, Satyam, Jnanam, Anantam, are indications used to describe Brahman, which is my nature, which is myself. It is an indication. Indication for what? Something which is self-evident. You see, if I want to bring a light, if I want to if I want to know what is outside, I need a lamp. I need either a light or I need the sunlight, one of the two. But in the case of the self is self-evident. It is conscious. It is awareness. And the three words are only describing or indicating so that my mind can travel in the direction of awareness. Self is felt very directly as the subject, not as the object. It is self-revealing, and the three words are used to only indicate, oh, this is how the self is. It is pure existence, pure consciousness, and pure happiness. Avedyaha api ayam atma aporokshata swaprakasha bhavadyam. What does it mean? Even though the self is unknown right now to me, it is not cognized by me, but it is not an object of the senses or the mind. So never can you say, I don't know myself, because I don't know means you are making the self as an object. I am is never lost. It is always there. I cannot construct any statement without I. Try to construct anything without the I, because I is the root. The experience is verbalized because of I. I can describe about so many things in life only because there is an I attached to that body. That I is called as the awareness principle. I is the consciousness principle. Ramana Maharshi in Saddarshanam says, he also in Saddarshanam also this topic comes as this and that and I. He analyzes this beautifully in Saddarshanam. What does he say? He says, you and that are based on I. Unless I am there, I cannot say you, I cannot say that. And when you go to the root of I, who am I? Suppose you go to the root of I, what he says, Ramana Maharshi says is, you and that disappears. That state of I is without the notion of I, you and that. There is no notion left. Because the moment you go to the depth of the I, the mind dissolves. When the mind dissolves, there is no I, there is no you, there is no that, there is no this. That state which is true and natural to the self is this pure consciousness. What Vidyaranya says in Panchadasi, this verse is exactly what Ramana Maharshi says in Saddarshanam. Third person, second person, all depend on the first person, aham. Idruk, tadruk depends on I. To know the self, I don't need any instrument. For example, in the sleep state, I am there. I want to know who am I. I am telling you in Chandogya chapter 6, section 8, verse number 1, it tells you that in the sleep state, I am one with the pure self. This is a clear proof. It is a pramanam. You can go to Chandogya 6th chapter, 8th section, 1st mantra. What does it say there? It says, all of us, yeah, not me or you, everyone who is in the sleep state. In the sleep state, what happens is I, you, this, that, everything is gone. And where is it all gone? It is all gone and into a potential condition which is called as causal body and causal world. But in this, is there anything beyond this causal world and causal body? Yes, there is existence, there is pure consciousness, which is the self, which is the real self. If I know that that consciousness is always there and I attach to that consciousness, then I am not bothered. Then all my sorrows are not there. That is the logic in which Shruti explains to me how to get rid of sorrow. So I can know the self, I can know the world. This is the topic for meditation today. How knowing the self is the Sākṣī. I don't need to meditate. I just had to remain as the self. Very simple. Because it is self-evident. You don't have to say, my mind is very dull, my mind is very sharp, my senses are very sharp. You don't need to say anything. I don't have a good memory. I forget all the verses which I learned. I forget the knowledge. All that is all belongs to the mind. It is not the self. To know the self is to be the self. And to know the world means what? I have to use the sense organs. I have to use other pramāṇas, like the arthapatti and so on. That is to know the world, to know the body, mind, and intellect. How do I know the body? I open my eyes, I see the color of the body, I see my hands, my legs. So all that is with karakams. Karakams means accessories. So the 5 koshas, the 3 avasthas, the 3 bodies are revealed by a light of awareness, consciousness. They are all objects of the pure self. So how to know the self? When I drop the Shabda, Sparsha, Rupa, when I drop all the sense objects, what is left is the pure self. This is a direct way of knowing the self. That is why we use something called as not this, not this. So it is the Ātma which tells to itself, Aham Asmi. It is not the mind. Mind, you may listen, but ultimately the final, ultimate knower of the whole universe is the Sākṣī. And that Sākṣī illumines itself. Illumines what? It knows itself as the self. This knowledge was not there before, and this knowledge is provided by what? From which Pramanam? What is the source for this knowledge? The source for this knowledge is Shabda Pramanam. What about the source for the other illumination of all the other objects in the world? The source is the 6 Pramanams. The Sākṣī is Pramata in front of the objects. Very careful. Remember this. Whenever this waking state is there in front of the objects, I am there, means what? That I is the Pramata, the ego I. Another word, the meaning of Pramata is the ego I, small I. So when I see the waking body in the morning, it is the Pramata which is experiencing the world of objects. But behind this ego I, the body and the mind complex I, there is a Sākṣī. That is what is revealed by the scriptures. Knowing, illumining is a verb. But when it comes to Sākṣī, it is not a verb, it is nature. The nature of Sākṣī is to illumine whatever is set in front. How do you define Sākṣī? Sākṣī is objectless awareness. Pure awareness. And it is known by which Pramanam? Śāstra Pramanam. If I don't have faith in the Shastra, I will not know my real nature. This is what the Shastra tells us directly. That is why in Tattvabodha we say faith, Shraddha, is one of the very important qualities for a student of Vedanta. For him, the Veda is the mother. Gayatri is the mother. It teaches, it brightens the intellect. Therefore, I chant the Gayatri mantra. That Gayatri Devi is the deity of the intellect, Buddhi. That Devi is there blessing the Buddhi. And it is teaching through the words of the scriptures. Saraswati Devi. So all students, they believe that there is something called as Ātma or Brahman, which is illumining my intellect, which is illumining my sense organs, and I experience the world. But the self is not illumined by another self. Then you will have anavastha dosha. Anavastha dosha means that for the second self, you will require the third self. The third, I mean, it is a regress infinitum. So there is no experience of the self with another self. That means one consciousness cannot illumine another consciousness because there are no two consciousness according to the Veda. So it is my own pure consciousness which is justifying to the ego that it exists. Ultimately, what is the ultimate realization? The ego I surrenders to the big I and says, Sākṣī I, you are finally the ultimate in the world. And it merges with the light of Ātman. Shastra only gives voice to my experience of the eternal self. Very important sentence. Shastra is only giving a voice to what? To my experience of the self, which is eternal. I have two experiences. I don't know about this eternal self. That is one experience. The second experience is about the body, mind, and the world. This is, everybody knows it. But who, the whole world knows this world of objects and the senses and the mind. But who reveals to me the Ātma? It is the Shastra. Knowledge is not pratyaksha or paroksha, hence it is swayam prakasha. This knowledge of Ātma is what? It is not pratyaksha jnanam. It is not paroksha jnanam. It is swayam prakasha jnanam, self-evident Ātma, knowledge belonging to the ever-evident, nityaha, always there. So knowledge by the senses, knowledge by the mind, and knowledge by the Sākṣī. There are three types of knowledge you should try to discriminate, differentiate. What is the knowledge of the senses? Each is independent in its own realm. The eyes will see only form and color. Ears will only hear the sound. The tongue will only taste. The nose will only smell. The skin will only know the knowledge of whether it is a hard surface or a soft surface. Whether the flower is soft, the petal is soft, or the desk, when I touch it, is hard, the hard wood, stone. Each of the sense organ has a path, has a road on which it can travel. It cannot go to the other highway. Ears are not required to prove the eyes. So the senses, this is the way they give knowledge. What about the mind? This mind, it puts all the sense objects' knowledge into one unitary experience for the indweller of the body, the jiva. The jiva is here called as the pramata, ego, I. This is only a reflection of the consciousness along with the mind. That is what is the knowledge in the mind. Chit chaya. In Kathopanishad is said as chit chaya. Now the third type of knowledge is Sākṣī, the knowledge of Sākṣī. The Upanishads say that the knowledge of the Sākṣī is the real knowledge. And what is that real knowledge? I alone am. Kaivalyam. I alone am. Satyam, Jñānam, Anantam, Brahma. Swata pramāṇam, self-evident. So this is how the three knowledges take place. I will try to quickly summarize this, what we have learned. I'm doing all this summary because we are trying to finish one topic called as Jñānam. The self transcends the five koshas, we have seen. There is nothing beyond the self, we know. And in the presence of the mind, I experience the Jagrat and the Swapna. And in the absence of the mind, I experience the sleep state. So in the sleep state, what happens is, it is an unmanifest condition of the mind. Mind comes up, mind goes to sleeping mode. When it is awake, we say it is Jagrat or Swapna, manifest condition. So absence of the pramata is not shunyam. It is not nothingness, but it is existence, consciousness, infinite, Ātma, Brahman. This sentence is very important because many students, when they study the scriptures, they say that beyond the three states, there is only blankness. There is no Satyam, Jñānam, Anantam. There is only blankness. There is a big debate which is done by Shankaracharya in the Taittiriya Upanishad, where this particular topic is discussed in detail. So, Ātman with reference to Vyashti Shariram, with reference to the Shariram, it is called as Ātma. With reference to Samashti, the total Prapancha, that with reference to one body, that consciousness, Satyam, Jñānam, Anantam is called as Ātma. With reference to the totality, it is called as Brahman. And it is self-evident, so Prakasha. And we can only use the Shruti logic and our own experience to realize the self. It is never an object of knowledge. It is never known by the senses and the mind. It is a unique principle of consciousness awareness. So it is known without being an object. This awareness is known without being an object because it happens to be the subject. And only the objects are called as idruk or tadruk. This whole thing is explained in a beautiful verse in Dakshinamurti Stotram, which is the 4th verse. Nana chit ghato darastitamaha deepak prabhabha swaram Jñānam yastu chu chakshurādikaranat tvara bahi spandate Jñānamiti tameva bhantam anubhate tat samastam jagat Tasmai Shri Guru Murthaye Ramaidam Sri Dakshina Murthaye. The whole thing about Jñānam which we discussed is Shankaracharya summarizes in one verse. So far, whatever you have learned in 14, 15, 16 verses, he describes in this verse. That it is like in a pot, if you keep a candle or a lamp in a pot with 5 holes, the lamp, when it glows, it goes out through the 5 holes into the outside world. And then the whole world, when you look from outside, how does it look? That the pot has got 5 different apertures. Looking at it from outside, we will say that everything is through the 5 holes. Everything is visible in the world through the 5 holes, 5 sense organs, in the case of the body. But when you are a consciousness which is inside, then you will say everything is illumined by that lamp. So Shankaracharya says, be that lamp in that pot, and be that consciousness which knows the whole universe. It is using only the 5 holes as a means to go out and experience and then come back. The process of knowing is called as vritti vyapti and phala vyapti. These are 2 technical terms. I have explained this before. Vritti vyapti means it pervades the object. Consciousness pervades the object. And then phala vyapti means what? It removes the ignorance, the darkness concerning that object. Where? In the mind. So one is that the knowledge, the light of consciousness, it goes outside. And the second aspect is what happens inside. Outside and inside ultimately is one light of pure awareness. Vedantic Upanishad also has a very similar meaning. So the ultimate knower is called as the absolute knower. There are many relative knowers. Eyes are a knower. Your mind is a knower. Ears are the knower. But what is the ultimate knower? It is Satyam. That is what is called as Anantam. Anantam means what? There is no limitation. It is always there in all the places, at all times, along with all the objects. That is what is the meaning of Anantam. And this self is the substratum. Substratum means it is the adhishthana. Everything else is superimposed. I'll finish the 2 slides so that we can finish this topic. So the flower has fragrance, the properties can come and go. That belongs to the objects. But the Swarupam, self, always remains without any ups and downs. There is no, it is single mass of consciousness which is ever there. So to know the self, first of all, you should know that it is self-evident and it is known intrinsically without any medium. There is no body, mind to know yourself. And in the sleep state, I am nitya muktaha. What is the purpose of analyzing the sleep state? It is to know that I am always free as this pure consciousness awareness. That consciousness, which is self-evident, is called as Brahman. It is not the objective knowledge. This verse, I'm going to take it up for meditation today. I will explain to you more. So this finishes the 28th verse. Now, next week, we are going to start with the second topic, which is called as Sat. There are three words I told you, Satyam, Jñānam, Anantam. We have finished Jñānam from 29th verse. We are going to do the second topic, and this has got, as I told you right in the beginning, that this second topic is covered in about 7 verses. 29 to 34 is 7 verses, and they will be covering pure existence. Yeah, so that we'll see next week. Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudacchade Purnasya Purnamadhaye Purnameva Vasishyade. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Does anybody have any question? You can unmute yourself and you can ask if you have anything.
Hari Om.
Hari Om, yeah, go ahead.
My name is Vijay. Can you talk a little bit? You talked about Jñānam.
Yes.
Can you talk how it is compares against Vidya, Paravidya and Aparavidya?
Okay, good question. When we talk about Jñānam, here in Taittiriya Upanishad, we are talking about Paravidya. Paravidya means it is supreme knowledge. It is Jñānam pertaining to the self. Aparavidya means the knowledge of the world, the knowledge of the body, mind, senses, which is the knowledge which we know through scientific field, which is physics, chemistry, botany, zoology, astronomy. Anything to do with objects of the senses is called as Aparavidya. So whenever you, in what we have studied today, the knowledge which is gathered, which is belonging to Pramata I, the ego I, is the Aparavidya. Aparavidya means it is either Pratyaksham, belonging in right in front of eyes, or it is Paroksham. I mean, for example, Jupiter, Mars, these are all Paroksha Jñānam. That also comes under Paravidya, Aparavidya. What is Paravidya? Paravidya means supreme knowledge. The knowledge of Ātma is called as Paravidya, or it is in what we have studied today, it is called as Vidya belonging to the Sākṣī, the knowing principle. If I want to know the consciousness, that knowledge pertaining to the nature of consciousness is called as Paravidya. It has got nothing to do with the objects. So all the 12 Upanishads which we study, they all indicate some aspect of this Ātma, this Sākṣī, and that is what is called as Paravidya. Am I clear?
Yes, you are. I have a follow-up question.
Yes,
This is not one one or the other. It is one and the other, right? You cannot get into Paravidya level without having a knowledge of Aparavidya. Is that right? Or it is one or the other?
Okay, another very brilliant question. In the Upanishads, they say that there is only Paravidya, there is no Aparavidya ultimately. You see, in the vision of the Upanishads, they talk about Advaita, non-duality. So, what the Upanishads, they start as Para and Apara Vidya. Ultimately, they say only Para exists. That's all. Only the pure consciousness exists. And this you will be able to realize it when you study the Upanishads clearly or the Bhagavad Gita clearly. In the 7th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, they talk about Paravidya, Aparavidya. In the 13th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, they talk about only one Vidya, which is called as Kshetrajna, the knowledge of Kshetrajna. Kshetram is Aparavidya. Kshetram merges into Kshetrajna. Ultimately, the Upanishads wants to for us to discover only one Vidya, which is the Brahma Vidya, which is a Paravidya. So in the light of the Upanishad, when you understand the ultimate, yeah, your beginning can be para, apara, it will discriminate and all that. But later on, it will tell you that Apara Vidya doesn't have an independent existence. Whereas Paravidya has an independent existence. How do you prove this? In the sleep state, I alone am. There is no Aparavidya, I exist. So Upanishad is very clear. Ultimately, you come to realize your nature as something beyond both the Vidyas, which is what is called as Brahman, which is called as Brahma Vidya. That Brahma Vidya, it doesn't, you see, this Para and Apara is only with reference to the world. But when you go beyond the world, ultimately there is only one reality. That reality is what is called as Brahma. As you study this Panchadasi itself, you will understand the clear meaning of this Para, Apara. Very, very beautifully, Panchadasi and the Upanishad, they describe this, and you will be able to follow it. It is just a question of just listening to the scriptures more and more. You will get complete clarity. You yourself, your intellect will be satisfied. Without any doubts, you will tell me, yes, this is Para, this is Apara, yes, yes, yes. But then when it comes to my real nature, both these are dropped and ultimately I alone am, which is called as Brahmavid. Okay, any other questions, follow up? Am I clear?
Yes, you're very clear. Thank you. Appreciate
Thank you. Okay. Any other questions from others?
Mr. Shekhar, hi, this is Jacqueline. I have one question.
Yeah, tell me, Jacqueline.
Time and space.
Yes.
So the time and space is within the consciousness.
Yes, it
Consciousness
is.
is the bigger, and then time and space is there, but because it illuminates.
Yes, it illumines the time and it illumines the space. It illumines means what? It makes it known for me. And it makes it unknown for me in the sleep state. Therefore, we say time is an object of consciousness awareness.
Okay.
Is it clear?
Time. Can you say again? Time in the
time is, you see, let's go back to your sleep state. In the sleep state, do you exist?
Yes.
Okay, you exist as what? As the witness of time, lack of time.
Okay.
In the sleep state, there is no time.
Yeah.
So what do you witness in the sleep state? I don't know any time.
Okay.
That is what is the object for your witness awareness.
Right.
In the waking state, what do you say? I am experiencing time.
Okay.
So consciousness is experiencing time in the waking state. Consciousness is experiencing absence of time in the sleep state. Who am I? I am that pure consciousness. If I know this consciousness, I will be ever free from the fear of death.
How is happening?
Okay.
Ever free from the fear of death. No more death for me, because I am not the body. Body is only in the gross waking state in one realm of consciousness. Body was born, body will die, that's all. But I am not that. That I come to know only from the scriptures, because the scriptures now, after listening for 2 years, 3 years, you say, yes, I am the awareness, I am the consciousness. That's all. Everything else is just a passing phase. It just comes, goes, comes, goes.
Okay.
Good.
Yeah.
Very good question. Good.
Appreciate.
Thank you.
And then another thing, the space supposed to be consciousness, right?
Space is an object of consciousness. It is the first thing which is born from consciousness. It is the subtlest thing from consciousness. If you ask me, what is born first is space.
Oh.
It is the subtlest, you know. And what is the grossest? Grossest is the body. So as soon as you wake up in the morning, what do you see? Ah, I am there, plus I can see Singapore, I can see my body, but body is existing in space. You know, everything is existing in space. So I know space only because I am consciousness. Space is the first object for consciousness. And the moment you see space, you experience space, you are aware of time. Because the mind is changing. You see, the concept of time comes when you're, because of the thoughts in your mind.
Okay.
Okay, these are very deep topics. But anyway, I'm sure all of you understand now.
Another one.
Yes.
Is space equal to gap?
Is space?
Equal to the gap between breathing?
Gap between breathing and space.
Or gap between the om?
Oh, okay. The gap between the two ohms is not space, but it is consciousness.
Ah, okay. Got it. Appreciate
Okay.
it.
Okay. There's a question here. Ishavasya Upanishad, verse number 9. Andhatama pravishanti e vidyamupasate tatho bhuya iva te tamo ya avidyam rataha. Okay, the meaning of this is they enter into blinding darkness who worship avidya. Into still greater darkness, as it were, do they enter who delight in vidya. What it wants to convey exactly. Okay. See, avidya and vidya. Vidya means is also a type of Maya Shakti. Avidya is also Maya Shakti. Avidya means non-apprehension of reality. Non-apprehension of reality is avidya. Vidya is misapprehension of reality. Vidya means your mind is projecting something because of non-apprehension. So what the Upanishad says is, whether you are in Vidya of the world, which is projecting, which is the Maya Shakti, which is projecting the world, or Avidya, which is the Maya Shakti, which is the cause of this projection of this world. See, Maya Shakti consists of two things, Avarna Shakti and Vikshepa Shakti. Avarna Shakti means wheeling nature. Vikshepa Shakti means projecting nature. So what the Upanishad says is, whenever you are involved in both these Shaktis, it is Maya. And you are in, whether you are in delight or whether you are in ignorance, you are in Maya. Don't give too much importance to this two worlds of experiences. So those people who are entering into Dvaitam, they are also in darkness because they are in the wrong road for search of the truth. Dvaitam means what? You are doing a lot of research on the world. For what? To find out who am I. Who am I is related to the consciousness subject. Instead of that, asking who am I and understanding I am the Ishavasam Idagam Sarvam, I am the consciousness which is all pervading, the first mantra of Ishavasya Upanishad. Instead of saying that, holding on to that Ishavasyam, Isha there means Saguna Ishvara. Holding on to that Ishvara, you should forget about this Vidya, Maya, Shakti. See, our mind is nothing but Maya Shakti. There is a power in this body. That power is projecting all these things for us, for everybody. For you, me, all of us, there is some power. There is some power which is projecting the world for me. That world, you forget about it. That is what is called as Brahma Vidya. You come to reality. Who am I? I am the pure self. I am the consciousness. I am the awareness. With that, you just keep on meditating on that aspect. One day you will say that Sākṣī is the reality. You yourself, I'm telling you this, just go through Panchadasi, you'll each and every one of you will realize the pure self, which is the goal of all our study. Okay, Akshay, am I clear?
Yes, sir, very clear. I didn't got in books this much explanation.
Okay, you see, the problem is when you read books and all that, you miss the gist of some of these depth of analysis. Okay, all right. Anybody else?
Yes. Hari Om.
Hari Om, thank you.
Shekhaji, Uma here.
Yeah, Uma, tell me.
Okay, I was listening to this chapter 11 of Panchadasi, and it in one of the verses says that when we get something, let's say I want something, and when I get it and I'm happy, and that Anantam is actually Brahma's Anantam.
Yes, which is reflected in the mind.
Okay, can you please explain it further?
Oh, very good. Okay. See, next week when I talk about the balance of the meditation from point number 6 onwards, you will come to know what is this Vishaya Ananda and what is Brahma Ananda. I'll explain to you in brief. What it means is, see, the Upanishads, they tell us that I am not this body, but I am something different than the body, which is called as Ātma. You are Ātma, I am Ātma, Jacqueline is Ātma, Ganesh is Ātma, Chandra is Ātma. All of us have this, are this Sākṣī. This pure awareness without the body, which I am in my sleep state, but I don't know that. You see, in the sleep state, I am ignorant. In the waking state, I become knowledgeable because I have the the Veda with me. I make use of the Veda. I sit down and say to myself in the waking state, I am the pure awareness. I am the Ātma. I am the Sākṣī of all the thoughts which come into my mind. Now, thoughts are of two types. Thought which are generated in the mind and thoughts which are generated by the world. Now, when you talk about happiness, there are two types of happiness. One happiness is called as Swarupa Ananda. Swarupa Ananda means what? It is the nature of myself to be happy without anything in the world. That is my nature, which is called as pure happiness, which is belonging to Ātma, which is called as Brahmananda. Now that is the original Ananda. You see, that is the pure happiness, which is always there, which you can experience anytime. All the time you can experience it. Now, there is another happiness which is just born and gone, born and gone, born and gone. What is that happiness? That is called as Vishaya Ananda. Objects of the world, whenever I experience them and they give me happiness, that happiness which is experienced by me through the mind is called as temporary happiness. Suppose I do chanting of Gayatri for 10 minutes. I feel very happy. Why? Because I didn't think about the world. I was continuously chanting. My focus was on the chanting. Therefore, the world did not give me happiness. What gave me happiness is the chanting. I felt very happy. Now that is a reflected Ananda. It is a reflection of what? Of my own nature. Anytime you can experience, see, this is only revealed to us by the verses in the Upanishads. There are specific verses which tell me that in Taittiriya Upanishad itself, they will tell me that when I analyze the word Ananda in Taittiriya Upanishad, which is the main Upanishad for this chapter 3, it will tell me that there are two happiness, one happiness belonging to the world, but that happiness is not Nityam. It is coming and going, coming and going. I was happy when I went to Australia for a holiday, but did it last too long? No, it went away, finished, gone. I went for a holiday here somewhere. I went there, here. I went all around the world, got happiness. That is one type of Ananda. I listened to this music, this music, another type of Ananda. I tasted this food, that third food, another type of Ananda. I smelled this flower, I smelled that flower, I smelled the jasmine, another type of Ananda. So happiness is only in the form of the sense objects reaching the mind, that's all. But who is illuminating this mind? That illuminator is me, the Ātma. All these Vishayas, that is what is the 11th chapter of Panchadasi. It's the 11th to 15th chapter. All of them are called as Ananda, 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 Ananda. All the 5 chapters. They all talk about happiness of the world. And how do I differentiate the happiness of the self and how do I appreciate the happiness of the world? There's one beautiful verse in the Bhagavad Gita, 2nd chapter, which if you remember that verse, you will understand all the verses of these 5 chapters. And that is, Matra sparshastu kaunteya, shitoshna sukhadukkara, agama pahino nityaha, tam titakshasva bharata. What does it mean? It means that whenever there is happiness which is born from the sense objects contacting the sense organs, you remember only one fact. It is not Nitya.
Okay.
It is temporary. So don't get too involved. Don't get deluded by the objects of the world. They will just last for some time. When they go away, you will feel sorrow. Whereas when you go to your internal nature and look at your own Ātman and realize that it is in the illumination of this Ātma, all other sense of pleasures are born and gone. I repeat, I am the light of awareness, consciousness. In my light, all other pleasures of the world of objects are born and gone. All pleasures belonging to all minds and all objects of the world are only from the light of awareness. Therefore, Taittiriya Upanishad says that the happiness of a jnani is the highest because he is attached to that pure light of consciousness. He is not interested in the objects of the world. Even if the body is interested, it will go through, it will experience because of prarabdha, because of punyam. Punyam and papam will give you happiness and sorrow in life. So whenever you are feeling happy, you feel, you must remember one thing. There is some punyam I have done, I am feeling happy. When papam comes, you will feel miserable. At that time also you say, oh, there must be some papam in my mind, and therefore it has come to fulfill that, sorrow in this world. It will be there as long as I am there. The body is there, it will undergo sorrow and happiness, but that is not the real nature.
So there's only one and only true happiness, which is our own nature, the Brahmananta.
Absolutely right. Always tell yourself, I am of the nature of pure happiness. Pure happiness means what? There is happiness, but there is no object. Absolutely no object. Not your body, not your mind, not the world. Nothing is there. That is why it is called as kaivalyam. Kaivalyam means it alone is.
Yes.
And that is what all our spiritual studies only to reveal this, nothing else. The moment your mind, intellect is able to just ignite this Ātma, that is the end of your spiritual study, finished. You will say, I have finished my study, I don't need anything else. Whatever you're going to teach me from tomorrow, I already know it. Because that is what is the ultimate essence of the whole teaching.
Okay.
Good, very good question. Thank you, Uma.
Thank you so much.
Okay. So, any other question?
Just
Yeah, Akshay.
yeah, just listening to this truth, very vairagya is generated.
Yes. You see, your vairagya goes up quite a lot when you are always in face of the truth. You see, there is no more left. That's all. It's pure. You see, you alone are. You see, you are completely withdrawn from the entire world. That is the beauty. You don't need to. You see, you don't need to have physical withdrawal. Mentally, just within a split second, you can reach your Ātma. The more you listen to Satyam, Jñānam, Anantam, or any other Upanishad and deal with the mantras related to Ātma, you start feeling joy ebbing in yourself. Oh, this is talking about my nature. It's talking about my nature. Okay. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shekhar-ji. Good night.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Shekhar.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sir.
Thank you, Vijay.
Thank you, Shekhar-ji.
Thank you.